Jack had never been to an alien planet before, but here he was, standing on the surface of a world far from Earth. The sky above him was a deep purple, and strange floating plants filled the air with a soft, rhythmic hum. It was beautiful, but Jack couldn't focus on the scenery. His mind was set on the mission ahead. The Galactic Council had sent him to meet the Velriths, a species known for their advanced science and knowledge in medicine. The mission was simple: exchange information about human biology with the Velriths. Jack had done countless missions before, but this one felt different. He didn't know why, but something about the place made him feel uneasy. He followed the guide through a large building, made of shimmering metal. The walls glowed softly in the light from above. The architecture was strange. Unlike anything on Earth, the halls were empty, and the only sounds were the soft footsteps of the guide and the low hum of the lights. After a few minutes, the guide stopped in front of a large door and pressed a button. The door slid open, revealing a sterile room filled with strange equipment and soft blue lights inside. A figure stood near a table, her back to Jack. She was tall, with a graceful posture, and she wore a white suit with intricate designs on it. Her skin was a light shade of green, and her long, silver hair fell neatly to her shoulders. The guide stepped aside, and Jack stepped into the room. The figure turned around, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. She was beautiful, but not in the way Earth women were. Her features were sharp and elegant, with eyes that sparkled like stars. There was an otherworldly quality to her, something that made Jack feel both intrigued and uneasy at the same time. "Jack, this is Dr. Lyra, the lead scientist for our research team," the guide said. "She will be overseeing your examination." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied Jack. He couldn't quite place it, but there was something about the way she looked at him that made him feel like a subject in a science experiment. He was used to the attention of other people, especially on diplomatic missions. But this was different. She wasn't just looking at him. She was analyzing him. "Hello, Jack," Lyra said, her voice soft but firm. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. We've been studying your species from afar, but now we get to understand you up close." Jack nodded politely, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling creeping up his spine. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Lyra," he said, his voice steady, but his mind racing. "I'm here to help with whatever you need." Lyra didn't smile. She just nodded and gestured for him to sit on the table. "Please, take a seat. We will begin the examination shortly. I'll need to gather some basic data first." Jack hesitated for a moment before sitting down. He had been briefed on what to expect: basic tests, physical exams, and a detailed look at his biology. But as he sat there, waiting, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wouldn't be just any ordinary medical examination. Lyra's eyes never left him, and her calm, calculating gaze made him feel like he was under a microscope. She moved toward a table filled with strange instruments, and Jack couldn't help but watch her. The way she moved was graceful, almost like she was floating rather than walking. He tried to remind himself that this was a professional exchange, but something about the way she held herself made everything feel personal. "First, I'll need to take some measurements," Lyra said, snapping Jack off but observant. "It's interesting. Perhaps it's the stress of being in a new environment." Jack didn't know what to say. His heart was racing, but it wasn't because of the unfamiliar surroundings. It was because of the way Lyra was looking at him. He had been on many missions before, but none of them had made him feel quite like this. He was no stranger to being studied or observed, but Lyra's intense focus made him feel exposed. "Is something wrong?" Lyra asked, glancing up at him with curiosity. "You seem a little tense." Jack forced himself to smile, trying to appear calm. "It's nothing. Just a little nervous, I guess. First time on an alien world." Lyra raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. She continued her examination, but Jack could feel her eyes on him, never leaving him for even a moment. He couldn't help but wonder, was this what it felt like to be the subject of an experiment? The strange part was that he didn't mind as much as he thought he would. There was something magnetic about Lyra, something that drew him in and made him want to learn more about her. But at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing control. Like he was being slowly pulled into a world where everything was new and unfamiliar. He didn't know it yet, but this mission was about to change everything. The days on Velrith were strange for Jack. The planet was beautiful, with bright skies that seemed to shimmer and endless fields of plants that looked like they belonged in a dream. But even as he marveled at the alien world, he couldn't forget the strange feeling he had every time he saw Lyra. She was always calm, always studying him, never taking her eyes off him. It made Jack uneasy, but it also intrigued him. He couldn't explain it, but there was something magnetic about her presence. The next morning, Jack found himself back in the medical facility. The soft hum of the equipment filled the room, and the blue lights cast a quiet glow. Lyra was already waiting for him. As soon as he walked in, she looked up from her notes, her sharp eyes meeting his. "Good morning, Jack," she said, her voice smooth but with a hint of curiosity. "Are you ready for the next part of the study?" Jack nodded, even though he wasn't entirely sure he was. He had expected the test to be quick and simple, but Lyra's methods were different. There was something about her approach that felt more personal than scientific. Every time she looked at him, he felt like she was trying to understand every part of him, not just his biology, but his emotions too. "Of course," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Lyra motioned for him to sit on a table. The room was silent except for the soft whirring of the machines. Jack tried to relax, but he couldn't help feeling exposed. He had been through physical exams before, but this felt different. Lyra wasn't just taking measurements. She was studying his every reaction, every movement. It felt like she was trying to understand him from the inside out. "First, I'd like to take some more detailed scans of your body," Lyra said as she moved to a different table, picking up a small device that looked like a handheld scanner. "I need to understand how your muscles react to different levels of stress." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You're going to put me under stress?" Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile. "Just a little," she replied. "It will help us understand your limits." Jack wasn't sure what to expect, but he sat still as Lyra began scanning his body. The scanner emitted a soft, pulsing light as it passed over his muscles, his joints, and his heart. Jack tried to stay calm, but the whole process felt too personal. Lyra moved carefully, her face focused and serious as she examined every part of him. The way she looked at him made him feel like a subject in an experiment, not a human being. It was unsettling, but at the same time, it was hard to ignore the small sense of excitement that built inside him. "Your heart rate is stable," Lyra said, her voice calm. "But your muscles are tense. I can tell you're nervous." Jack didn't respond right away. Instead, he just nodded. He didn't know how to explain it. Every time she spoke to him, it was like she was seeing through him, reading his every thought without even trying. It made him feel vulnerable, but also alive in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. "Are you comfortable?" Lyra asked, her voice softer now. She looked up at him, her eyes still fixed on him as though she were trying to read the very depths of his mind. Jack didn't know how to answer. He didn't feel uncomfortable in the traditional sense, but there was something about the way she observed him that made him question everything. Was this how it felt to be studied? To be the focus of someone's complete attention? He wasn't sure, but it made him feel both exposed and strangely important. "I'm fine," he said, finally, breaking the silence. "Just a little tense. It's not every day I'm examined like this." Lyra didn't smile, but there was a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She nodded slowly. "I understand. I've been studying the human body for a while now, but this is the first time I've had the opportunity to study a human in person. It's different than reading data." Jack couldn't help but ask, "What do you mean?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, her eyes still locked on him. "When you read data, you only see numbers. But when you see a person, when you study someone's reactions, you start to understand things that can't be measured. You start to see the nuances of how the body works in real time, how emotions influence the body." Jack swallowed, trying to hide the tension in his shoulders. He didn't know why, but he felt like Lyra wasn't just studying his body, she was studying his mind. His emotions, his very soul, and it was unsettling in a way he hadn't expected. For the next few hours, Lyra continued her examinations. She asked Jack questions about his body's response to stress, to pain, to fear. She wanted to know everything: how he felt, what he thought, and how his body reacted to it all. It was strange, the way she pulled him into her world, making him feel like his body was no longer just his own. It was like he was part of something bigger, something important. As the session finally came to an end, Jack stood up. Feeling a little dizzy from the intense focus of the study, Lyra was still looking at him, her eyes sharp and calculating. "I've gathered a lot of data," she said, "but I need to learn more about how your emotions affect your body. You're a soldier, right? You've been in high-stress situations before." Jack nodded, trying to stand tall. "I've seen my share of combat, but I don't think that's what you're really interested in." Lyra paused, her eyes softening just a little. "You're wrong." But Jack wasn't sure if he wanted to be solved. There was something about Lyra's relentless focus that made him feel like he was losing control. He had spent years training himself to be tough, to handle any situation that came his way. But here, in this sterile room with Lyra's watchful eyes on him, he was starting to feel small. It was during one of these sessions that Lyra surprised him, as usual. She had been running a series of scans on his body, measuring his heart rate and blood pressure as she asked him a series of questions. She had been asking about his time as a soldier, the battles he had fought in, and the things he had seen. Jack had answered her questions before, but today it was different. "Tell me about your last battle," Lyra said, her voice calm but with a hint of curiosity. Jack tensed. It wasn't the first time she had asked about his experiences, but something about the way she asked it today felt different. She wasn't just asking to gather information. It felt like she was trying to understand the emotions behind the words, and that made Jack uncomfortable. "I've been in a lot of battles," Jack said, his voice rough. "Some are harder to forget than others." Lyra's eyes softened for a moment. She took a step closer to him, her presence filling the room. "Tell me about one of the hardest ones. What did it feel like?" Jack hesitated, not wanting to relive the memories. He had spent so many years burying the pain of war deep inside, and now it felt like Lyra was trying to force him to open up. She had been so focused on his body, on his physical responses, but now she was focusing on his mind, and that was a place he wasn't sure he wanted her to explore. But there was something in her gaze, something that made him feel like he could trust her, even if he didn't want to. I was in a battle on a planet called Helios. It was a fight against an alien species that had been attacking our colonies. The battle was brutal, and there were casualties on both sides. But what really haunted me was the moment when I had to leave behind a group of my men. We were outnumbered, and it was the only way to save the rest of the squad." Jack's voice faltered for a moment. "I had to make the call, and they didn't make it out." Lyra was silent for a moment, her eyes never leaving his. She didn't say anything, but Jack could feel the weight of her understanding. She wasn't judging him, and that made it easier to talk. For the first time, he felt like someone was truly listening to him, not as a soldier, but as a person. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Lyra finally said. "You carry that with you, don't you?" Jack nodded, his throat tight. "Every day. It's not something you ever forget. It stays with you. The faces of the men I couldn't save. The guilt. It's always there." Lyra reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. Her touch was surprisingly warm, and it made Jack's heart race in a way he didn't expect. She wasn't just examining his body now. She was connecting with him on a level he hadn't anticipated. "Jack, I can see it," she said softly. "You carry the weight of that decision, and it affects you more than you realize. Your body is reacting to it even now. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense. It's not just physical stress, it's emotional too." Jack didn't know how to respond. He had never allowed himself to talk about the things that haunted him. He had buried it all deep inside, where no one could see it. But Lyra wasn't like everyone else. She wasn't trying to fix him or make him forget. She was trying to understand, to help him understand himself. I never thought I'd talk about it, Jack said quietly, but I guess it helps. To let it out, Lyra's expression softened. It does. The body holds onto pain, Jack, and it's important to acknowledge it, to release it. Jack looked at her, his chest tightening. He wasn't sure what it was about her, whether it was her intelligence, her compassion, or something else, but he felt something shift inside him. He was beginning to understand why she studied him so intently. It wasn't just about science. It was about connection, about understanding what made humans tick. Lyra stepped back, giving him space. "We've made a lot of progress today," she said, her tone professional again. "I think it's time for a break." Jack nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe again. The weight on his chest wasn't completely gone, but it felt lighter. And as he stood up to leave the room, he realized something he hadn't fully understood until now. He wasn't just a subject of her study, he was someone she was trying to help. And in that moment, Jack knew he was no longer just part of a mission. He was part of something bigger, something that could change the way he saw the universe and maybe even the way he saw himself. Jack had grown used to the long hours spent in the medical facility. With Lyra, every day, she asked him questions about his body, his experiences, and his emotions. She measured his heart rate, tested his muscles, and studied the way his body responded to various levels of stress. But the more they worked together, the more Jack realized that the sessions were no longer just about his biology. There was something deeper happening, something he couldn't quite explain. Lyra's questions were no longer just about his physical responses. She began asking about his thoughts, his feelings, and his personal experiences. Jack felt the lines between being a subject of study and a person talking to another person blur. She didn't just see him as a soldier or a specimen. She saw him as a human being, and that made him feel vulnerable in ways he hadn't anticipated. It was late one afternoon when the conversation took a different turn. Jack had just finished another round of scans, and as usual, he was sitting on the examination table, waiting for Lyra to finish her notes. There was a tension in the air, a quiet anticipation that Jack couldn't shake. Lyra had been unusually quiet today, as if she was working through something in her mind. Jack wondered if she was trying to figure out what made humans tick, or if it was something else entirely. Lyra closed her notebook and looked up at Jack. Her expression was thoughtful, almost serious. "Jack, we've been working together for quite some time now, and I've learned a lot about your body. But there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Jack felt a small knot form in his stomach. "What's that?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Lyra hesitated for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "I've been studying humans for a long time, but I've never studied someone like you. You're different from the others I've studied. You have a strength that's not just physical, it's deeper, and it's making me curious. Why do you think that is?" Jack was taken aback by her question. He had never really thought about it that way. Sure, he had been through a lot in his life, but didn't everyone? He lost comrades, seen things no one should see, and fought in wars he didn't believe in. But he had always pushed through, somehow. "I guess I just keep going," he said slowly, unsure of how to answer. "I mean, I don't really think about it. I just do what needs to be done." Lyra leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "But that's what I'm trying to understand. You've been through so much. You've made decisions that most people would never be able to live with. And yet, you don't just survive. You thrive. You seem to have this resilience. Where does it come from?" Jack looked away, focusing on a small piece of equipment on the table in front of him. He didn't know how to answer. He had never really thought about his resilience. It was just part of who he was. His whole life had been about pushing through the pain and moving forward. But now that Lyra was asking him about it, it felt like something more, something he didn't fully understand himself. "I guess it comes from having no other choice," Jack said quietly. "When you're in the middle of a battle, you don't have time to think about what you've lost or how hard it is. You just keep going. It's either that or you break. Lyra's expression softened. And you've never broken. Jack didn't answer right away. He thought about the battles he had fought, the men he had lost, and the countless moments of doubt that had plagued him over the years. He had always kept going, but that didn't mean he hadn't felt the weight of it all. I've had my moments, Jack admitted, but I think I've learned to bury them. You can't afford to break. Not when others are depending on you. Lyra nodded, her gaze intense. I understand. But what if I told you that burying those emotions isn't healthy? What if I told you that it's affecting you more than you realize? Jack frowned. What do you mean? Lyra stood up, walking over to a table filled with various devices. She picked up a small device and brought it over to him. I've been studying your stress levels, Jack, not just your physical responses, but the way your body reacts to emotional stress. And I've noticed something interesting. You have a high level of tension in your muscles. But it's not just from physical exertion. It's emotional. You're holding onto something inside, and it's affecting you more than you know. Jack stared at her, a sense of unease creeping up his spine. He had never considered that his emotional state could be having such an effect on his body. He had always prided himself on being able to control his emotions, to keep them in check. But what if he had been wrong? What if all the pain he had buried inside was starting to catch up with him? I didn't realize it was that obvious, Jack said, his voice low. I guess I've been carrying a lot of weight around for a long time. I thought I could handle it, but maybe I was wrong. Lyra's eyes softened. You're not alone, Jack. You don't have to carry that weight by yourself. You've been through a lot, and it's okay to admit that it's affected you. It's okay to let go of some of that pain. Jack looked up at her, a mix of emotions stirring inside him. He had spent so many years pushing forward, trying to be strong, trying to be the soldier everyone expected him to be. But now, with Lyra standing in front of him, offering him a chance to release some of that pain, he realized he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt a small sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let someone in. Lyra smiled gently, sensing the change in him. You don't have to have all the answers, Jack. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. Jack took a deep breath, feeling lighter than he had in days. Thanks, Lyra, he said quietly. I think I'm starting to understand that. The days passed, and Jack began to notice something strange. The once uncomfortable sessions with Lyra had started to feel different. The tension in the air had softened, and something else had replaced it, something that made Jack look forward to his time with her. He had always been focused on the mission, but now he found himself drawn to her, not just as a scientist or a professional, but as a person. Lyra's calm demeanor, her intelligence, and her sharp, observant nature made him feel understood in a way no one else ever had. It wasn't just the physical tests anymore. She wanted to know more about who he was as a person, the things that shaped him, the reasons behind his choices, and for the first time in years, Jack felt like he could open up about it. One afternoon, after another round of scans, Jack found himself walking with Lyra outside the medical facility. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the ground. The sky had turned from its usual purple to a deep orange, and the air was warm. A slight breeze carrying the scent of the strange plants that surrounded them. Jack was surprised when Lyra suggested they take a break and go for a walk. It's important to stretch your legs, she had said with a smile that was rare for her, and I believe we could both use a change of pace. Jack didn't argue. The walking sessions had become rare, and the chance to leave the sterile walls of the medical facility felt like a relief. They walked in silence at first, the only sounds being their footsteps on the soft ground, and the occasional hum of the alien wildlife. It was strange to feel so relaxed with someone who had once made him feel so exposed. So, Jack finally said, breaking the silence, you studied humans for a long time, right? What's the most surprising thing you've learned? Lyra's eyes glanced over at him, thoughtful. That's an interesting question, she said after a pause. I think what surprises me the most is how much emotion humans carry with them, how deep it runs, how it affects everything I've studied. Your species' biology, your strengths, your weaknesses. But I think the most fascinating thing is your ability to feel, to love, to hurt. You're not like the other species I've studied. You don't just survive, you live. Jack felt a warmth spread through him at her words. It wasn't just an observation. It felt like something more, like she had seen something in him that he hadn't fully acknowledged before. "And what about you, Lyra?" he asked, his voice softer. "What surprised you about yourself?" Lyra stopped walking for a moment. Her eyes focused on the horizon. Jack waited patiently, watching her as she collected her thoughts. "Me?" she asked, almost surprised by the question. "I suppose I've learned that I'm not as detached as I thought I was. As a scientist, I've always focused on the facts. I've always kept my emotions separate from my work. But with you, I found myself caring in a way I didn't expect. I'm not just interested in your body or your biology, Jack. I'm interested in you. I want to understand what makes you you." Jack felt a shift in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite explain. He had never been good at expressing emotions, never had the words for what he felt, but hearing Lyra say that made something inside him stir. For the first time, he didn't feel like a subject. He felt like a person, someone who mattered. "I'm not used to being understood like this," Jack said quietly, his gaze drifting down to the ground. "Most people only see me as a soldier, a tool. They don't care about the person behind it." Lyra took a small step closer, her presence warm and reassuring. "I care, Jack," she said gently. "I don't see you as just a soldier. I see you as someone who has endured a lot, someone who has fought through pain and loss. And I admire that." Jack looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. He had always been taught to keep his emotions in check, to bury his feelings deep down where no one could see them. But now, with Lyra, it felt different. She didn't push him to hide what he was feeling. She listened, and somehow, that made all the difference. "I've spent a lot of time pushing people away," Jack admitted, his voice soft. "It's easier that way. But being here with you, it's like I'm finally starting to let people in. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing." Lyra's expression softened. "It's a good thing, Jack. It's what makes you human. It's why you're strong. Because you feel. And because you allow yourself to connect with others. That's something that not every species can do." Jack didn't know how to respond to that. He had never thought of his emotions as a strength. But the more he listened to Lyra, the more he began to understand. She was right. His ability to feel, to care, to be vulnerable, those things had always been a part of him. And maybe, just maybe, they were the things that made him truly strong. As they continued to walk, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between them. He wasn't sure if it was the quiet companionship they shared, or the way Lyra saw him not just as a soldier, but as a person. But whatever it was something he hadn't expected. Later that evening, as Jack sat in his room, he thought back to their walk. He had always kept people at arm's length, afraid of what they might see if they got too close. But with Lyra, it felt different. It felt like she was already seeing the real him without judgment, without expectations. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like maybe, just maybe, it was okay to be himself. Jack sat on the edge of the examination table, staring at the strange machines in front of him. His mind had been drifting all day, the quiet hum of the medical equipment almost soothing as it blended with the gentle rhythm of his thoughts. After days of intense scans and tests, Jack was beginning to feel like he had been reduced to nothing more than data. His body was an open book for Lyra to read, and while it made him uneasy, there was also something strangely comforting about her careful attention. Lyra had been quiet today, focused on her work more than usual. Jack couldn't help but notice the tension in her posture. She was always so composed, but today, something was different. She wasn't just collecting data. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, like she was preparing for something big. Finally, Lyra turned away from the console she had been working at, her face thoughtful. Her eyes met his, and Jack couldn't read the expression on her face. It was like she was thinking about something important. "Jack," she said, her voice steady but tinged with a sense of urgency, "I've discovered something." Something that could change everything. Jack raised an eyebrow, the tension in his chest tightening. What do you mean? He asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Lyra walked over to the table where she had set up various instruments, picking up a small datapad. She turned it toward Jack, showing him a series of images and readouts. I've been studying your immune system for the last few days. Your body is more resilient than I originally thought, but I've found something in your DNA that could help solve a major problem for Earth. Jack felt his heart rate increase, the familiar feeling of stress creeping in. He had heard plenty of talk about Earth's problems, wars, diseases, threats from other species, but he didn't understand how his body could hold the answer. What exactly did you find? He asked. Lyra's eyes were intense as she pointed to the data on the screen. It's your immune system. I've been analyzing your blood, looking for any signs of unusual resistance to disease. And I found something remarkable. You're immune. Cells are able to fight off infections in ways that other species cannot. Your body has developed a unique defense mechanism, one that could be used to protect not just Earth, but possibly other planets as well. Jack blinked in confusion. Are you saying my immune system could save Earth from a disease? Lyra nodded, her expression serious. Yes, I believe so. There's a virus spreading across several systems in this part of the galaxy. It's highly contagious and deadly, and no species has been able to find a cure. But the way your immune system works, the way it responds to foreign pathogens, I believe it could be adapted to Phi. The virus, it's a breakthrough. Jack, your body is the key. Jack sat back, his mind racing. The idea that his body's DNA could hold the key to saving Earth was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He had always thought of himself as just a soldier, a tool to be used in a war. But now he was being told that he was part of something much bigger, something that could change the course of history. I don't understand. Jack said slowly. How could my body help with a disease? Lyra smiled, but it wasn't a triumphant smile. It was a smile of understanding, as if she had already known Jack would have trouble processing it all. It's your immune system's adaptability. Most species have defenses that are rigid, specific to certain threats, but yours is different. It can adapt, learn, and fight in ways other species' bodies can't. It's not just a matter of fighting off one disease. It's the ability to evolve, to adapt to whatever threat comes your way. Your immune cells can learn faster than most, and that's what makes it so unique. Jack felt a strange sense of awe wash over him. It was hard to believe that something as simple as his immune system could hold the key to saving lives across the galaxy. He had never considered himself special. He had always been just another soldier, doing his job. But now, it seemed like he was part of something much greater. Lyra placed the data pad down and turned toward Jack. I need your help, Jack. This research, this discovery, it's something I can't do alone. I can use your immune system to develop a cure, but I'll need to test it. I'll need your cooperation to make sure it works. Jack's mind was still reeling from the revelation, but he nodded slowly. If it can help Earth, if it can stop this virus, I'll do whatever you need. Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, Jack saw a hint of gratitude in her expression. Thank you, Jack. I know this is a lot to process, but this could save millions of lives. It could change everything, and it's because of you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of their meaning. Jack had always seen himself as a soldier, a person trained to fight and survive. But now, he was part of something bigger than himself. His body wasn't just a weapon, it was a source of hope. It was a key to saving lives across the galaxy. For the first time since arriving on Velrith, Jack didn't feel like a stranger. He didn't feel like a tool or an experiment. He felt like a part of something important, something that could make a difference, whatever it takes. Jack said, his voice steady, "Let's do it." Lyra nodded, her face filled with determination. Together, we can make this work. And we'll do it in a way that will help not just Earth, but every species in the galaxy. As Jack stood up, ready to face whatever came next, he realized that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, and with Lyra's help, he knew they could make a difference. The weeks following the revelation had been a blur of activity. Jack had never imagined that his body could be the key to something so important, but now, with Lyra's help, he was learning just how much power his own biology could hold. Every test, every scan, every conversation with Lyra led to a new understanding of what his immune system could do. What he had once seen as just his body's basic function was now the focus of something far bigger, something that could save millions of lives. But as the days passed, Jack began to notice something else, something that went beyond the science. He and Lyra had become something more than just partners in research. The connection between them had grown in ways Jack hadn't expected. The moments of quiet conversation, the walks through the strange alien landscape, the small, shared smiles, they had begun to mean more to Jack than he had ever anticipated. Lyra was no longer just the scientist who studied him. She was a person, a partner, someone he trusted. And with that trust came the uncomfortable realization that he was feeling something. For her, it wasn't just admiration for her intellect or respect for her strength. It was something deeper, something Jack couldn't quite define, but something that pulled him toward her in ways that felt as unfamiliar as they were undeniable. One evening, as Jack stood near the large windows of the facility, looking out at the vast alien landscape, he felt a presence behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" Lyra's voice was soft, yet there was a sense of certainty in her tone. Jack nodded, not sure how to explain the mix of emotions that had been swirling inside him. "I can't help it. Everything feels so different now. I came here thinking I was just doing a job, but now I feel like I'm part of something I never even understood." Lyra approached him slowly, her steps measured. As always, she stopped next to him, looking out at the same view. The alien sky was darkening, the stars beginning to twinkle in the distance. "You are part of something important, Jack," she said, her voice carrying a sense of quiet conviction. "Not just because of your body, but because of who you are. You've shown me that there's more to you than just what's on the surface. You have a strength that goes beyond your training, beyond the soldier you were forced to become. That's what makes you special." Jack didn't know how to respond to that. He had always seen himself as just a soldier, a tool for the mission. But now, with Lyra's words echoing in his mind, he began to wonder if there was more to him than he had allowed himself to believe. "Lyra, Jack started, but his words faltered. What could he say? What words could describe the way he felt? Lyra turned toward him, her eyes meeting his. There was something soft in her gaze, something that made Jack's heart race. She had always been a professional, always focused on the mission, but now there was something else between them, something unspoken, yet real. "I know this isn't easy," Lyra said quietly. "We've both been through so much, and the weight of everything we've discovered together is more than just science. It's personal. But I want you to know that I'm here for the mission, yes, but also for you. You don't have to carry this alone." Jack felt a lump form in his throat as he looked at her. Her words, so simple and sincere, struck a chord. Deep inside him, he had always carried his burdens alone, thinking that was the only way to survive. But now, with Lyra standing beside him, offering him something he had never allowed himself to have, trust, companionship, and even care, he began to feel like maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to be alone anymore. "I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that," Jack said, his voice low. "I've always kept people at arm's length. I thought it was easier that way." Lyra's expression softened, and she stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "You don't have to keep everyone away, Jack. You're not alone anymore." "Not in this." Jack looked down at her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch. For a moment, he felt like everything was still, like the world outside had faded away, leaving only the two of them standing together. It was a feeling he hadn't known in years, and for the first time, he didn't want it to end. "What happens now?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra didn't immediately answer. Instead, she turned back to the window, her eyes looking out at the stars. "Now we move forward," she said softly, together. The research isn't finished yet, and there's still so much more to discover. But whatever happens, we'll face it together. The mission isn't over, but it's become more than just a mission. It's a chance to make a real difference. Jack nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. They had come a long way, and there was still so much to do. But for the first time, he felt ready. Not just for the mission, but for whatever came next. "I'm with you, Lyra," Jack said, his voice steady. "In this, and in whatever comes after." Lyra smiled at him, a smile that reached her eyes. And for the first time, Jack saw not just the scientist, but the person, the friend, the partner who had been standing beside him all along. As they stood there, together, looking out at the alien stars, Jack realized something he had never fully understood before. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something greater, and with Lyra by his side, he was ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that he didn't have to face it alone.